Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for stopping by. Today I want to talk to you about sphagnum moss. I wanted to go over some of the good things, some of the bad things, what I look for in terms of quality, also what brand I use. And then at the end I want to wrap up by showing you some examples of what properly used sphagnum can achieve. So one of the good things about using sphagnum moss is it lasts a really long time for an organic substrate without decomposing. So this plant here, I've had it on this mount with the same sphagnum probably for 3 years now, and you can see the sphagnum still looks pretty good under there, and if you smell it, it smells pretty much the same as the day I mounted it. So for an organic substrate, sphagnum moss has an incredible, I guess you can call it shelf life or lifespan when in use. So another good thing about sphagnum is its ability to absorb water. So what I've done here is I've just saturated this little cup of moss and I've poured most of the excess water off. And so if I put another cup here and I just squeeze it, you see it's almost like a sponge in that it can retain a ton of water. You see? And I mean, this is still damp, right? So there's still a lot of water in here. And look, basically, I don't know, a sixth of the volume of the sphagnum I had in here was just water. So yeah, sphagnum is really good at retaining water. Now this could be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, as sphagnum can sometimes be really tough to gauge whether or not the center is dry. And so it can be tough to know how much water you're giving your plants if you have them growing in sphagnum moss. And so for that reason, when I mount things with sphagnum, like this little apanthes here, I try to put basically as little sphagnum moss as possible. I use just enough to keep the plant on and to cover the roots, and then to make sure it's structurally capable of supporting the plant. So for example, for a larger thing, like this Asianthera here, it looks like I have a lot of sphagnum there, but that's just because the plant has a lot of roots. That's probably only 2 strands of sphagnum thick. And so what this allows it to do is to dry out over a day. So these things will be pretty dry by the morning, and when I water them, it evaporates fast enough to not suffocate the roots. And I mean, you can see the roots on this thing growing out of the sphagnum here. Pretty healthy, if I do say so myself. So here's another example of something I've mounted recently onto this piece of wood. This is a miniature Cattleya, formerly a Sophornites. This is Cattleya acuensis, and you can see I have single strands of sphagnum to cover the roots, and then it's basically bare root at that point. And so the sphagnum retains enough water for the plant to be wet enough without drying out, but then there's also a thin enough layer so that it can dry out fast enough without rotting the roots. So it's amazing at holding water, as you can see by how much water I was able to squeeze out of this, and it lasts forever. So what might be some of the things that are not so great with sphagnum? And one of them is it compacts really easily. So I have 2 little dishes of sphagnum here. On the surface, it looks perhaps like they're the same amount, right? If you look at the side, I mean, you can clearly see this side is more dense than the left. The right is more dense than the left. But here, let me just pull these pieces of sphagnum out, and you can see just how much more is in this side than that. So, quick disclaimer, I don't actually know if it's that much more visually because I just kept stuffing this until I couldn't. But anyways, here we go. So this is the compacted sphagnum. You can see all these fibers here. So I would say this is probably enough sphagnum here to pot up 2 plants in 2-inch pots. And this would probably be enough. Maybe this is how much is in this one. This is like slightly wet. This would be enough to pot up a plant, 1 plant in a 2-inch pot. And so you can see almost double the volume I was able to compress. And so what does that mean for your plants? If you're just jamming them into pots, especially if they're not net pots with sphagnum, your root zone is going to be so waterlogged when you water it, and all your roots are going to die. And so that's something you got to watch out for when you're using sphagnum. So what constitutes a good quality sphagnum? I like to have something that has some of this like skinnier part, and then these thicker pieces with these are the heads, I guess, of the moss when it was alive. But I find that having both this thinner part and this thicker part, when you compress it into a pot or into a mount, the thinner pieces allow for more airflow, and then the thicker parts allow for better water retention. So it's like best of both worlds. So personally, I like something that looks like this. I know that some people will probably prefer if the sphagnum looked like this all the way through the strand and that it was super long. But that stuff's pretty expensive and can be hard to find. And so this is a pretty readily available product, I find. And it's not actually as orchid specific moss. This is actually for, I believe, reptiles and amphibians. The Zoomed brand, New Zealand sphagnum. Been using this for the last 3 years, and I find that it's been pretty clear of debris. Sometimes there's a little bits of sticks and stuff, but yeah, it's pretty good overall in my opinion. Okay, time for the fun part, which is some examples of what some kinds of growth, root growth specifically, you can get when you use sphagnum properly. Of course, other aspects of culture have to be good as well, but I really attribute a lot of that success in culture to the sphagnum because it makes things so much easier. So if you've been following my channel, I think I did an unboxing video from Ecuagenera in either October or November, and that's when this plant is from. This is Restrepia subote. It was a huge plant when I got it, but it's blooming. It bloomed a couple times, and see, this is the newest leaf. It's so nice and shiny. And this is potted in sphagnum. Only sphagnum. And I'm just gonna pull this out of the pot now to show you some of the roots. And this is my first time pulling it out of the pot, so I hope there's roots. But you can see the top looks like a little algae, and that's just because it gets more light and wet. But the bottom part, this is really not that densely packed, you can see. And there are a ton of roots in here. I don't know if you can see. Here's one right here. There's another one, root tip there. That's just a strand of sphagnum. But you can see the roots are loving it down here. So, good example of what you can get if you use sphagnum properly. Obviously combined with good culture, but yeah. So I'm just gonna stuff this back in here. You can see here on this side with all those roots. Roots are my jam. Okay, just get the right there. And you can see it kind of stayed together in one piece. It was not dry. It was still a little bit damp all the way through the bottom, and so that's why I was able to keep it in one piece. Okay, next up, something that's been in a pot a little bit longer was sphagnum. Mentioned earlier, sometimes it'll start to grow sphagnum, live sphagnum on top, so you can see there's some nice, lovely green live sphagnum. This was in here since February 2024. So this is Masdevallia decumana, as I have like a ton of these. This one's still in bloom, but let's see what this looks like. It's a little stuck. Oh, there we go. Alright, so you can see this one's even more loosely packed, as there's like a giant hole here that I didn't even fill when I was filling the pot. You can see it's grown a layer of sphagnum on top, but this is not dense at all, and so I'm being pretty careful not to squeeze it so it falls apart and loses its shape. But I mean, look at these roots. Really, really healthy roots. And I mean, this hole here is not a concern to me, because the sphagnum retains enough moisture that the humidity in that region is probably high enough for these roots to grow anyways. So. Let me get this guy back in here. Don't remember which side this tag was in, but it's there now. So yeah, that's been almost a year, I guess, because that was repotted on February 13th. So now I'm going to show you a couple mounted examples. Start here with another Masdevallia. This one is Masdevallia amplexa. This is a sphagnum video, so I want to highlight that I'm not using very much sphagnum. Maybe like one layer. I think I got this plant from Equigenera last January. So, but anyways, you can see the roots here are really, really healthy. And I mean, this thing, look at these roots. I don't know if that's because of the sphagnum, but I just want to show off these roots. Yeah, but anyways, you can see on this mount, because I keep things pretty wet, don't need a lot of sphagnum. I basically just use it for structural support. If the thread wasn't so sharp that it might slash through roots, I would just probably bare root things and put some live moss on there. And see, this is also starting to grow some stuff on it. Probably just from random spores that have been bouncing around my grow area. It's also in spike. So let's say you hate sphagnum moss. It's nasty. You don't like the smell of it. You don't like the touch of it. Are there alternatives? Of course, there's alternatives. Here's one of them. This is a synthetic sphagnum moss, and so theoretically, this should take even longer to decompose. And I mean, I have this Dendrobium cuthbertsonia mounted on it, and it seems to be pretty happy. Again, don't know how much I can attribute to just general culture versus this specific substrate, but this stuff also works if you don't want to use dried sphagnum moss. It does dry out faster, and I think it also holds less water than sphagnum. So those are just some things to keep in mind when you opt for an alternative like this. So an alternative, if you don't want to use another alternative, if you don't want to use dried sphagnum, is live mosses. So here is Lepanthes mounted on cork with some live moss. And here are some Lepanthes in live moss, just like in a deli container. So good thing about live moss is that it tells you when it needs water, and it won't hold, I've found in the past, as much water as dried moss. So when this thing goes pale, I actually have an example. For example, like this. This is all live moss. So this is telling me, okay, water it, because it needs some water. But yeah, so the live moss does dry out faster, so that is one of the downsides of using it instead of the sphagnum. I've been experimenting it because I found some species are a little sensitive actually to having dried sphagnum for whatever reason, and this has been recovering really nicely since I moved it to live moss. And then these were just growing in live moss when I found them sprouting in my orchid tank, orchid terrarium, and so I just kept them in live moss because reasons. Anyways, thanks for watching my video. Another thing I'll add is sphagnum moss is a really good base for growing live moss. So I have a bunch of spores in here. Hope to see some moss growth soon. You can see a little bit of greenery. A lot of that is just sphagnum, but like that's all sphagnum. But yeah, it's really good to grow live mosses in because it stays wet enough. Anyways, thanks for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one.